Those are the support ones that flank
Right.
out. All the other ones carry the Enola, not the smokes, the Enola bomb or the explosive grenades, frags.
Right.
I know there's a word for grenades that explode. All right, so into our question, which is another really great one from John of the Rochesterian realm. So before we get back to we're finally back to world building, the main premise of the podcast tonight. How do we straddle the line of referencing or taking inspiration from current events without being tasteless or inappropriate? I have a very definitive answer, and I do try to keep my strong opinions to a somewhat minimum on this show when we're talking about anything remotely serious. And it's that you fucking don't. Okay? Draw inspiration from current events, at least in as much as you can. Here, we don't. No one. Who is it? Was it Josh Warren? One of the guys who runs Milsim. Whoever did was Milsim West the one they did the Vice doc on fairly recently?
Oh God,
it was like late 2020. But like he was given the briefing. He was talking about like political shit. He's like, keep your. I know we just had an election, but keep that shit to yourself. No one here wants to hear about it. I mean, kind of a lesser but similar situation here. I mean, there's a couple thousand years of history, arguably, you could pull from, at least in a vague sense. You could theoretically even, base the politics in a lowercase p, or the battle tactics, or just the general cultural situation on an event as far back as the ancient world. Okay, I don't want to hear about. I can't believe it's not Russia and Ukraine fighting. The end. You guys are welcome to disagree, but I really don't see kind of. It's one of the there's such a thing as situations where it might not end bad, but nothing good is likely to come of it, and maybe it can only possibly end bad, or it might not. You might break even, but there's little chance of it going well to a point where perhaps only bad can come of it. Especially from the perspective of running events in any kind of like semi-business context.
Evan,
or even.
Where you want me to go?
Go ahead, Mike.
I had a rule of thumb that I didn't do anything that was less than 30 years old. So Vietnam was fair game, Korea was fair game, World War II was fair game. Everything else had to be fictitious. Like I wouldn't, we did Black Hawk Down. That was probably the only exception, and only because it was so publicized, and unfortunately that movie was so ingrained into our local airsoft culture.
Not to interrupt, but thanks, by the way, Eli. It was Milsim West that they did the Vice doc recently.
Yeah. The biggest thing, I always try to stay away from anything current, because first off, most airsofters are under the age of 30 for the most part, except for some of those old fucks dragging around. But for the most part, it's all younger guys at the time. And I didn't want to have anything that would trigger anybody who was involved in Gulf War or, like any of that stuff. And we did a lot of work with the Guard guys, and some of those guys served overseas. And out of respect for them and what they saw and did, we never really brought anything from that era in. Not that it would have been a great time. I think that, a lot of the original Gulf War would have been a fucking riot to do. I don't know how you'd find enough people to put on one team to be the Royal Guards, but generally speaking, we tried really hard to not do that. So I don't know.
Okay, so not tooting my own horn, but this is you're largely making my point in a similar way. Or we're in agreement honestly, at a worst case.
Just out of respect for the people that might have actually been there, done that, I didn't want to bring any of that into play. And sometimes, and I really feel that if you're pitching a Ukraine-Russia game right now, it's probably in poor taste.
Yeah.
Not so much that I have anybody personally that was involved in any of that, but I know people have relatives who were there. People have family that's from both sides of that conflict.
Sure.
And I would never want to put them to be uncomfortable.
Right.
That's it for me.
I agree with both of you guys. It doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
But just from a alternate point of view of another reason not to do it is, I think current stuff is generally not well researched enough.
It has limited potential from for
you to really know what's how to represent it. That is true. Eli brings up a good point. We did do a Lebanon game, but if your average person could name anyone other than the Israelis who were involved in that conflict, you'd be lucky. And Lebanon, frankly, was skirting that Vietnam era. But for me personally, modern stuff and imitating real world conflicts that are either just finished or um, are still ongoing is kind of boring to me. Like that, you can't come up with something more inventive than that.
That's what I was getting at too. Like you can sort of poke
There's
holes in the logic behind going this route from completely selfish perspectives. I mean, there's people
oh
who,
yeah, and that's what I
whether they
said.
have
I mean,
anyone affected by things going on or not, even if they don't, they probably don't want to hear about it. They're here to have fun and vibe out. I mean, as you said,
well,
from a historical standpoint, you don't know enough to really sort of flesh out any kind of serious event
and,
beyond, okay, these guys were this camo, these guys were this camo, they're fighting right now.
and at least based on what's being presented about the Ukraine war right now, who is going to want to play the Russians? And if there is somebody who wants to play the Russians, do you want them at your field? That's like it's like asking if well, we're going to have a bunch of guys who are SS, and somebody enthusiastically signs up for that. I don't want them at the fucking field.
Hmm?
I mean, that
You
might
know,
be a good litmus test to get rid of people you don't want to deal with.
yeah. I mean, and there's
Right? Yeah, it could be like
the SS one is
a stakeout game.
is
A
almost
sting, a sting
yeah,
op.
yeah. The SS one's kind of a joke too, because we actually did have a guy who wanted to play
Uh-huh.
SS, and
That,
he got lit up real bad,
my
as
God.
as he should have.
Well, he
And
was
there's
a historian,
yeah, it's okay. He was a historian, so that
right?
negated all problems with that.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah,
and
runs a
even I
museum
mean,
in his basement.
even with historical stuff, I think what is the context of if we were doing a not that anyone would ever want to do this, but if we're going to do a Cambodian civil war op,
Right.
is it going to be two opposing sides fighting each other, or is it going to be the killing fields reenactment? That's two very different
Possible interpretations of that
groups of
conflict.
people and viewpoints on the world. Um, and if you're having a killing fields op, count me out. I don't want to fucking come to that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing with World War II. Are you doing a Eastern Front, or are you doing an Einsatzgruppen, round up all of the partisans and shoot them? It's just or whatever. Um, there's a certain element of sensitivity that has to play into um, even something that's historical in any way, shape, or form explicitly. You could do um, an op based on the Syrian civil war, and if it's called something different, and you have different groups involved, and you take the ISIS or the religious elements out of it, nobody's probably gonna think twice about it, and nobody's gonna care. But if you say, yeah, we're doing a Syrian civil war, and these guys have to play um, Shabiha, these guys have to play ISIS, these guys are playing the resistance fighters, these guys are playing the Kurds, and um, you know somebody else is playing the Russians. Again, there's a lot of people who are going to be involved in that game that I don't want to be associated with. So I think just to get back to John's question, it's taking inspiration from elements of current events
Yeah.
As long as they're appropriately camouflaged and used, used in such a way that it's respectful to what's actually going on, I don't think anyone's going to get upset. It's when you explicitly come out and are like, this is a Syrian civil war game, or this is a Ukraine game, or this is this, or you get real world in groups. And, even if you do something like, wow, this is a Rochambeau game, but these guys are going to play the Kurds,
Right.
you're already veering into very dangerous territory for a
Yeah.
number of reasons. And that's kind of my viewpoint on it. But really and truly, I think you have plenty of stuff to work with without going the Law and Order route of ripped from the headlines
Yeah.
episodes, and it's just I don't know, it just feels lazy.